Shooting under a quarter MOA group. That's every precision shooter's dream. Tiny holes, big impacts. And it doesn't always require a high-end rifle. You can get away with your mid-grade rifle, setting up your workhorse, the brass. Today's informative video, I'm going to go over some new techniques of what I'm doing that seems to work to get you that quarter MOA group and below. Stick around. Since your guys' time is very valuable, to emphasize in this video and cut it shorter, we're going to work off a proven accuracy node and further redefine it with these techniques, and also give you guys some food for thought for shooting 1,000 yards and beyond. So with that said, I'm going to already assume you know how to do a ladder charge. I recommend using the Satterley method: case annealing, trimming, pocket primer uniforming, flash hole deburring, a headspace and bullet comparator, and also fire form cases. The quality of brass that you choose to build your handloads off of. In my opinion, this makes the biggest impact for getting that tight group and long range precision downrange. I like using Starline brass because it fits the budget and it does a phenomenal job getting those really tight groups and far impacts. And the reason why choosing manufacturers like Starline, Lapua, Peterson brass is strictly because the alloys in the brass allow for uniform case expansion. This I'll talk about in a little bit. But your fireform cases, like you see here, really show what's going on in your rifle. I'm going to go over concentricity, its importance, and what tools for setting up concentric handloads. You may find that you may already have these tools on your reloading bench. And marking the high spot on your concentricity, we'll talk about indexing your bullets, something I like to call concentricity indexing, before making that shot. Also, I'm going to go over the benefits and theory of sizing annealed brass slightly over your chamber's headspace. So neck turning, does it help? When should you do it? And why should you do it? We'll go over that too. Now in my journey, what I found that really helped out quite a bit for lowering standard deviation numbers and extreme spread numbers, something needed for long range impacts 1,000 yards and beyond, is volume sorting brass. I'll go over the benefits of this and why I think weight sorting your brass is a big waste of time. Even though you can produce 100% consistent handloads, which is the key for precision, consistency, there's a few things and variables that you cannot see within the brass. We'll go over the carbon ring and how to read it. And I'm going to show you guys some DIY tools that you can make for free to get your proper chamber dimensions and measurements. And for final thought, we'll talk about shooting 1,000 yards and beyond, how I'm doing it, and why I'm choosing the equipment that I'm using. It's going to be awesome to get your guys' opinions. I'll be looking forward to your comments below. And most importantly, I hope that some of these techniques that I'm showing helps you out. If it does, comment below, let me know. I would love to hear it. So let's dive right into it. In my experience, having a very concentric handload has really helped tighten up my groups in long range. You may not notice it 700 yards and closer, but at 1,000 yards and beyond, having a very concentric handload along with very low standard deviation and extreme spread numbers when doing your load development have really helped tighten up those groups to get under sub MOA. Concentricity refers to runout. Having excessive runout means when the bullet is fired, that bullet will engage the lands harder on one side than the other. This causes instability, and at long range, that does make a big difference. So, I chose a tool like this. And the reason why I chose this tool is because the dial indicator can be positioned to measure inside case diameter and outside case diameter before and after resizing. I could also measure the body of the cartridge and also the bullet with these rollers. This concentricity gauge also uses a roller for having even pressure, unlike the other ones. Having a tool like this helps confirm that your die and press setup is capable of producing uniform and concentric rounds. Some of the other concentricity tools require you to spin the cartridge with your fingers. You could get an improper readout because of the different pressures of your finger. So, I think this is a pretty good upgrade. And for a precision hand load, you want no more than 3 thousandths of run out. As you can see here, I got roughly 1.5 thousandths. And that line that you see marked is my high spot of my concentricity. So let's talk about that. Concentricity indexing, or clocking your hand loads. This requires having a very tight single-digit extreme spread number on your hand load. Knowing that any kind of runout induced when fired causes slight instability and unbalance on the bullet. When you're clocking your shot, what you're allowing this to do is when the bullet spins, shot for shot, when your FPS is near the same, you're also clocking your impacts. I have noticed that long distance, this has really helped me out reduce one less variable and really tighten up those groups. So I volume sort my brass, I do not weight sort. Why do I not weight sort brass, and why do I think it's a big waste of time? If your answer for weight sorting your brass is somewhat in the lines of culling your brass that does not have the same dimensions internally or case volume, well, then my question to you is, why do you weight sort your brass? So the goal here is to achieve uniform case capacity between the cartridges. One cartridge could actually weigh a little bit more than the other, yet the internal volume is exactly the same. This only needs to be done once. The tool that I'm using here is a primer pocket plug. This is from 21st Century Shooting. What this allows you to do is when you deprime the case, this plug has a simple little O-ring that you can put the cartridge on top of that. It gives you a flat base and volume sort your brass. You only have to do this once on your fired cases. What we're trying to accomplish is basically culled brass that has internal volumes that are a little bit less than all the other ones. We're after those low standard deviation extreme spread numbers. Using water, a simple little eyedropper tool, and a mixture of isopropyl alcohol. I'm using 91% isopropyl alcohol, and what this does is this relieves the surface tension and not allow a bubble to form on top of your case. So get a little squirt, mix it around, right there. The alcohol helps eliminate some of the microscopic bubbles inside water. Though alcohol weighs less than water, the little mixture we made here does not accurately depict the actual weight of your internal volume. In order to do that, you have to use pure H2O. So like I mentioned, changing your case capacity or having a cartridge that, for instance, is bumped back more than it should, your internal volume is different. A 0.1 grain volume difference makes a huge impact. As you see here, this powder charge of hydrogen 4350 at 43.9 grains for the 6.5 Creedmoor, and my case capacity of 53.5 grains produces 2,790 FPS. If I was to change this and make this, let's say, 0.4, a 0.1 grain difference on volume, let's see what the velocity number is. Just a 0.1 velocity number, lowering it rose my muzzle velocity in this simulated ballistics program, quick load, to 2,799. So this goes to show that with even just a 0.1 grain difference on your volume, your velocity numbers could jump up quite a bit. At 10 FPS, at long ranges like 1 mile, 1,200 yards whatsoever, that could be a difference between hitting your target or being right off of it. So this is why I think weight sorting your brass is kind of a waste of time. Essentially, you're doing nothing. Might as well do exactly what you're trying to do. Find that actual case volume. I'm a big believer of free floating your shell plate and your dies. I'm using the Mech Marksman, and as some of you know, the feature in this press is this: the ability to free float the shell plate. I do also believe on those arbor presses and those kind of die setups, but the cost of those kind of setup is a lot more than usual. On this press, I've upgraded to the Hornady quick change bushing. The O-ring on the quick change bushing allows for a little bit of free play. The features that this press have, along with the free floating shell plate, is the fact that the ram is very sturdy and is also honed and reamed exact tolerances. Though, you don't need a press like this. This press runs around $150, but you could get away with a Lee press or even RCBS chucker and get the same kind of results as that. I'll show you guys how. The majority of the presses today use some kind of locking mechanism to hold a shell holder together. The Lee uses a C-clip. Removing that C-clip allows that shell holder to move around like the mech marksman. This allows for better concentricity and self-aligning of the cartridge. Once removed, you can replace that C-clip with a typical O-ring. You can buy these O-rings on a set in Harbor Freight. Get one that fits just around the ram. This is going to allow your shell holder to stay in place and not fall off. All said and done, you got a free floating shell holder, and this will really help you out on your hand loads. So the dies that I'm using is pretty simple. A typical full-length sizing die with a decapping pin removed, the Lee collet neck sizing die, and a self-centering bullet seating die with the proper stem for the profile of the bullet. This one's a Vickerman die. It's a universal 30 caliber. I'm also using a RCBS gold metal match die. This one is meant for the 6.5 Creedmoor. So Redding also does make something called a body die. That is another tool that I like using. This one specifically for the 6.5 Creedmoor. What the body die does is basically resizes the case, squeezes the body back down, and allows you to either bump the shoulder back without touching the neck tension whatsoever. Kind of pricey. It could get anywhere to 65 bucks to up to 80 bucks. You can sometimes get it on sale on Midway USA for around 60. And that's what I got here. So we're going to talk about sizing your brass just over your headspace of your rifle. Why do I do this? As a hand loader, you're trying to eliminate all the variables possible. The traditional way of bumping the shoulders back 1 to 2 thousandths leaves one variable. And basically what that is shot for shot, you're relying on the piece of brass to uniformly expand and fill that chamber. Your bolt on your rifle has a camming action and allows to really lock a cartridge in place. So I'm utilizing that camming action to do the final sizing of the brass. I've gotten comments in the past about doing this, saying that you're going to get a hard bolt lift when you're doing this method. In my experience so far, that has not happened. And the reason why is because when you're using the folding sizing die, you're sizing the body of the cartridge back down. The hard bolt lift that you hear people talking about is basically when folks only neck size their brass and they've done 3 or 4 firings out of the case. When you're sizing your body back down, that hard bolt lift does not happen. So like I mentioned, we're using a bolt to utilize and final size this brass. So I'm going to set this die up to basically resize the brass 5 10,000ths to 1,000ths over my headspace measurement. The main key to getting low standard deviation and extreme spread numbers shot for shot is uniform start pressure. So when a cartridge is fired, everything's got to blow it out and expand to seal off those gases. Sizing your brass just over your headspace, in my experience, has really helped lower standard deviation numbers because it eliminates that one variable, which is basically the brass expanding. So one of the last things I forgot to mention about this method, locking this cartridge in place keeps the primer pockets from getting loose prematurely. Believe it or not, my last batch of 6.5 Creedmoor brass has gotten over 29 firings. Yes, 29 firings on one piece of brass. Well, basically a set of 50 brass. Also, it helps lock the cartridge as uniform and concentric to the bore axis as possible, allowing just the neck to expand, sealing off the gases. As you can see here, this is twice fired brass that has not been cleaned. And you can see the soot line, the carbon ring on there, where all the gases are going. There's no gases or carbon buildup protruding into the shoulder of this cartridge. Seeing this really tells that the cartridge, when fired, is definitely sealing off all the gases and going forward. So let's set up the Redding body die, size some brass just over the headspace. So doing this, you want to go ahead and decap, that way you get an accurate measurement. Go ahead and get your fire piece of brass with the decapped primer out. Get your headspace measurement. You're going to want to zero that out. This may take a couple times on your full length sizing die. You're not necessarily work hardening your brass because it's barely doing any work. So I'm using unique case lube to go ahead and resize this brass. Again, we're only focusing on sizing the body down. We're only focusing on getting the headspace just over my chamber dimensions. So this may take a couple times. As you see, I spin the cartridge about 30-40 degrees. This part of the process probably will be the most time consuming as you're relying on your measurements. Got 1,000ths over my headspace. Since I'm using the Redding body die, it did not mess with the neck tension whatsoever. As you can see here, the bullet falls freely in there. You could do the exact same thing using your full-length sizing die, and later fix the neck tension with the lead collet neck sizing die. The lead collet neck sizing die is an awesome die like I mentioned. It has the ability to actually uniform the case neck thickness without the need for neck turning. We'll talk about neck turning in a little bit. I've tried the neck sizing bushing dies like the ones from Reading. I wasn't satisfied with the performance of the die. The concentricity wasn't there. Maybe just the die itself. So I always found myself reverting back to the lead collet die. It produces about 2/1000 of case neck tension for the bullet. I rely strictly on bullet tension and do not believe on bullet crimping. Well, at least for precision hand loads. As you see here, every pass I make, I spin the cartridge about 30 degrees. This helps with concentricity. Now for your bullet seating dies, this is where you want to invest in a good die, like the one here. This is an RCBS gold medal match die. As a quick tip, you want to go ahead and mark a shell plate per caliber. If you have multiple shell plates like I do, for instance like this number 2, each shell plate's a different thickness. This will vary your bullet seating depth as well as your sizing. So go ahead and mark them out per caliber. This RCBS gold medal match die comes with a micrometer for ease of use. It also has a little window for dropping the bullet in and seating the bullet. Like I mentioned, this die does a phenomenal job for concentricity. Now this Vickerman die, it's a pretty unique die. It's a universal 30 caliber die, similar to the RCBS gold medal match with the window. The only thing about the die is that it may require a shell holder extension for short calibers like the 308. But with the concept of this die, it's very similar and it produces very concentric hand loads. So I'll emphasize again, the bullet seating die is a great die to invest in upgrading. My top 3 recommendations are the RCBS gold medal match die, the Vickerman die, and also the Forster die. So neck turning brass is kind of hit and miss. For my Savage Creedmoor 110 tactical, it loved the neck turn brass. The 308s that I've tried out, not so much. One of the advantages of neck turn brass is concentricity. Neck turn brass helps get that bore-to-bore access concentric as possible. To determine if you actually need the neck turn brass, for one, you get a fired case and see if a bullet can freely fall into the case like that. Most of the chambers in our modern day rifles today are actually cut a little bit larger to accommodate reliability. They aim towards hunting applications, thinking that majority of us will be in the field in the elements. So if you can get a fired case and get a bullet and it freely drops in there, and you have the ability to anneal your brass, basically making it softer, I would recommend just doing a lead collet neck sizing die and help get that thickness uniform. Regardless, this is still a really good tool to have. You can set this up to basically just cut down just the high spot of your cartridges. I've noticed with the 308 when I neck turn the brass, I started getting very high standard deviation extreme spread numbers. Looking at a fired 308 case that I neck turned, I started noticing the gases and soot were actually getting into the case head or the shoulder, which told me that the gases were blown by before the case completely sealed on the chamber. The key to getting low standard deviation extreme spread numbers is that uniform peak pressure. If you can get this case to seal as fast as possible when it's fired, we're talking fractions of a second when all this happens, that will help lower that standard deviation number. With all that said, yeah, you can get a neck turning tool, but don't count that will 100% improve your groups. Like I said, it's hit and miss on some calibers and some rifles. Now the carbon ring that I'm referring to is that line that you see on a fired case. Even with all the techniques shown today, there really isn't an efficient way to test the alloys in the brass. Reading the carbon ring will help sort these pieces of brass together and put them in groups to help that uniform case expansion. The cases that continually show a carbon ring that is oddball than the others, you want to go ahead and cull that from the group. This helps eliminate some of the flyers or low impacts at long range. From my testing, the cases that had a lower carbon ring produced a lower velocity, and at long range, that lower velocity meant a lower impact. Reading this also helps show that your annealing process and also your case prep are working in unison. So here's a couple tools to accurately measure your case-based ogive measurement and your chamber length. The tool on the left and the one in the middle are fireform cases that are neck sized only. The little slit in the middle was made by a Dremel. Really easy to do. The tool to the right is a max chamber length. I use this to determine my trim length. Most folks go off the manual on the specified SAMI spec. Little do they know, the chamber length on their rifle is a hell of a lot more than they think. That area in the chamber allows for carbon to build up, thus increasing your pressure and increasing your velocity. So what I do is I find my max chamber length of my rifle and then trim back 5 thousandths. This also gives the ability to seat the bullet out further if you have the throat available. To make the chamber length tool is pretty simple. With a fireform case, you square up the case neck using a trimmer. And then you go ahead and cut off a ring. That ring, you then put a slit into it. This will allow the ring to slide up and down the bullet, getting your overall chamber length. When using the DIY case overall length tool, some of the chambers of your rifle may catch the bullet. So I recommend putting a Sharpie mark just in case that rifling pulls the bullet back. But it's pretty simple. Load it in the chamber, slowly close the bolt, open the bolt, and then take a measurement. I found this method to be very repeatable. This was shown to me by James Pollard. Thanks, buddy. Unlike the Hornady case overall length tool, this one's free and easy to make. And you're using fireform brass and getting a real measurement. The Hornady tool, however, puts a little bit of play, thus not an accurate reading. So accurately determining your chamber length helps determine what to trim your brass to. Like I mentioned, that unused space in your chamber, the area in front of your case mouth, can collect carbon fouling after consecutive shots without cleaning. Also, as an advantage, utilizing that extra trim length can help aid in better case support, as well as freeing up case capacity with the ability to seat the bullet longer. And as you can see here with the 308 case, I got about roughly 30 thousandths more of trim length that I could utilize. NOEBulletMolds.com also does make this tool called a chamber length button for different calibers. It's essentially the same thing and cheap in cost. So the proof is in the pudding, right? So that I'm not blowing smoke up your guys' butt, let's roll in a little footage of me shooting some groups. Anyways, we'll talk about shooting 1,000 yards and beyond, what it takes. So I'm going to quote the 3 P's. Patience, practice, and persistence. You got to get out there and shoot with what you got, regardless of what people think and what limitations you think you have. You won't know until you actually do it. Finding your limitations as well as your rifle's limitations will show where your money needs to be invested. From my experience, as you can tell on my channel, I don't really have much high-end stuff, including my rifles. I always challenge myself to think outside the box. Instead of following what everybody says, I go ahead and I actually do some testing to see what results I get. From the few years of me doing this, the general conception that I've seen and heard from folks sometimes isn't true. You won't know that until you actually try it out. So like I said, I'm not perfect and my methods aren't always perfect. I'm always willing to try things out to see what works. So I challenge you to do the same. Now there's a few other things that I've done on this rifle that I really haven't mentioned. I use a fire lapping compound from David Tubbs Final Finish. I recommend using one of these on your rifle. Basically, it takes off the tooling marks and uniforms that barrel. David Tubbs Final Finish is a good product. I've used this on 3 rifles so far, and so far I've seen results. JB bore paste is another alternative. It's a good way for lapping your bores and getting that thing uniform. It's been proven in the past by many competition shooters. So like I mentioned on my channel, I don't really have a lot of high-end equipment, but I'm still making it work. I still get suggestions to upgrade my equipment, my rifle, scope, even reloading supplies. Though my current target right now is an AR-500 steel at whatever distance, 24 by 24. I'm not shooting bullseye. So as I continue my journey, I'm going to see what actually works. Break down the things and concepts that people talk about. I hope you guys join me, and I hope you found this informational. If this helped you out, let me know. By the way, if you stuck it out this far, thanks very much. I much appreciate it, and I'm always open for comment, suggestions, and feedback. Comment below, let me know, and I'll catch you guys on the next video. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you soon.